All right, welcome. If you're managing a business, or even just studying too, there's one area you absolutely have to master: human capital. But the decision to hire someone, or keep them, or let them go, it's not just some HR checklist. It's actually a direct result of a fundamental microeconomic principle. Today, we're doing a deep dive into that principle, something called derived demand. And trust me, understanding this isn't just for an exam. It's the key to making smart, strategic decisions about your most important asset, your people.
Okay, so let's just start with the most basic question you can possibly ask. Why does a business hire anyone in the first place? Now, the easy answer is, well, to get a job done. But from an economic perspective, that's not even half the story. See, a company, as a rational player, is only going to hire one more person as long as the extra money that person brings in is more than, or at least equal to, what they have to pay them. And that entire calculation, it's driven by the very concept we're here to unpack today.
And that leads us right into the core theory here. We have to separate the social side of a workplace from the pure economic mechanics. The choice to hire somebody is not a popularity contest. It's a cold, hard calculation, and it's based on market signals that, honestly, have very little to do with the worker themselves and everything to do with the final customer.
So here's the textbook definition. Derived demand basically says that the demand for any ingredient in a business, whether that's people, raw materials, whatever, it doesn't exist on its own. It's a secondary demand. It's derived from whatever that ingredient is used to produce. Think about the steel that goes into cars. You and I don't go out and buy giant rolls of steel for fun, right? Of course not. Car companies buy it because we, the consumers, are demanding cars. So the demand for steel is derived from the demand for cars. And labor? It's exactly the same. It's an input, and its value to a company is tied directly to how much the market wants the final thing it helps create.
And this quote, man, it just nails it. It cuts right to the heart of the matter. Let's really analyze this for a second. The primary event, the thing that starts the whole chain reaction, is the customer ordering food. That's the real demand. The decision to hire cooks is a secondary or derived event that happens because of that first one. The takeaway for a manager here is huge. You could spend months finding the most talented, most efficient cook in the world, but if you aren't focused on marketing and creating demand for your restaurant's meals, that world-class cook just becomes a very expensive, underused asset. The real job isn't just managing your staff, it's forecasting and generating demand for what they produce.
And here's the really crucial part, the thing you have to get. The link between these two demands is direct, and the timeline can be scary short. When demand for the final product drops, the derived demand for the labor to make it drops right along with it. Just look at the market for building houses, for example. If interest rates go up and cause a 20% drop in new home sales, well, the derived demand for carpenters, electricians, and plumbers doesn't just get a little soft, it can completely collapse. For a manager, this means your staffing plan has to be tied to your market forecast. You're in a constant battle to match your labor costs, which can be pretty fixed, to a revenue stream that goes up and down. And that mismatch, that's a primary source of risk for any business.
Okay, so theory is one thing, but to really see this in action, let's look at a real-world case study. The tourist town of Tanjung Lesung gives us what economists call a natural experiment. The market there is so cyclical, so predictable, that we can actually isolate the variable of consumer demand and watch its direct impact on the job market in real time without a bunch of other economic noise getting in the way.
And it all kicks off with this one number, 90%. That's a hotel occupancy forecast. Now, this isn't just some number on a report. It's a huge demand signal. For the hotel managers there, this forecast is the starting gun for a whole bunch of operational and financial decisions. The choice to hire more staff isn't made when a flood of guests shows up at the front desk. It's made days ahead of time, based entirely on a projection. And that is a massive managerial insight. Modern HR planning is all about data analytics and forecasting. But the risk is obvious. If that forecast is wrong and only 70% of the guests actually show up, the hotel has already overspent on labor, and that hits the bottom line, hard.
And this slide, well, it lays out the whole playbook perfectly. Let's break this down. Step 2, calling casual workers. Now that's a really important strategic move. The hotel is deliberately avoiding permanent fixed-cost employees. Instead, it uses a flexible labor pool so it can match its variable costs directly to its super variable revenue. That's textbook operational agility. So for 3 days, the local demand for service workers shoots way up. But then, come Monday morning, when the final product, the hotel stay, has been consumed, that demand curve shifts just as violently back down. From the hotel's point of view, the need for all that extra labor is simply gone.
So this really puts that extreme volatility side by side.
On Friday, you've got high tourist demand, which justifies a high demand for workers. In fact, this is when the hotel makes its money, right? It's when revenue is highest, allowing it to cover those higher labor costs. But by Monday, the tourist demand has disappeared, which means there's no revenue stream to support those jobs. For the hotel to keep all those extra workers on staff would be economically insane. The real managerial challenge, then, is to build a business that can handle this whiplash, one that can profit from the crazy peaks while surviving the quiet troughs with as few fixed costs as possible.
Okay, so we've talked about managing these short-term spikes, but the bigger, more strategic question is, how do you get off that roller coaster? How does a business or even a whole region move beyond this cycle of temporary gigs and create stable, permanent employment? Well, that requires a different kind of thinking. It requires actions that fundamentally and permanently shift the entire labor demand curve to the right.
And you got to ask the strategic question here. Given how efficient that flexible, casual worker model is, why would a manager even want a stable workforce? Well, the answer is all about trade-offs. A permanent workforce lets you invest in training, which leads to higher skills and better productivity. It cuts down on turnover and recruitment costs. It can help you build a much stronger service culture. So the strategic goal is to create a business environment where the benefits of that stability start to outweigh the costs of being less flexible. And that only happens when the underlying demand for your final products gets stronger and, just as importantly, more consistent.
So the source material points to three main levers you can pull to do this. Let's break each one down. First, capital expansion. Building 50 new villas, that's a big investment in capital. But here's the key. This kind of capital complements labor. It doesn't replace it. Those villas are totally useless without cleaners and maintenance staff. Second, you can create new attractions. A theme park completely changes what you're selling. It doesn't just mean you need more hotel cleaners. It creates demand for totally new kinds of jobs: ride operators, performers, engineers. It diversifies the whole local job market. And third, you can increase consumer spending. This is about attracting a wealthier customer. A guest who orders a fancy three-course meal requires a lot more kitchen staff per dollar of revenue than a guest who just grabs a coffee.
Now, this idea right here is absolutely critical for anyone studying business strategy. We often hear the story that technology and capital are job killers. And look, sometimes that's true. Think of an automated checkout kiosk replacing a cashier. That's a substitution. But in so many industries, especially services, capital and labor are actually complements. So a manager looking at a new investment has to ask a key question. Is this new machine or this new building or this new software going to complement my people and make them more productive, or is it going to replace them? The answer to that question really determines the entire future of your company's HR strategy.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, the macro-level implications. We've seen how one single company manages derived demand, but what happens when an entire region, an entire industry, is built on a really volatile source of final demand, like tourism? Well, the concept of derived demand explains a kind of systemic fragility that ends up affecting everybody.
And this quote, it just perfectly captures that systemic risk. That chain of derived demand acts like a lever. A pretty small shock to the end consumer can cause a massive, amplified shock to the demand for labor. A pandemic stops travel. A recession shrinks people's vacation budgets. A week of terrible weather ruins a holiday weekend. In every single case, the first shock is to the demand for the final product, the trip, the hotel stay. But the immediate and often much worse consequence is the total collapse in the derived demand for hotel workers, tour guides, and restaurant staff.
So what's the bottom line here? What's the big takeaway? Well, for a manager, it means you have to build a resilient organization. That means disciplined cash flow management, maybe business interruption insurance, and finding creative ways to generate demand in the off-season, like hosting corporate events. And for a policymaker, it means understanding the massive risks of having a local economy that's not diversified. It points to the need for strong social safety nets, like unemployment benefits and long-term policies that attract different kinds of businesses to the area, so you have multiple sources of final demand to help stabilize the entire job market.
So I'll leave you with a final thought experiment to chew on. This principle is everywhere. Think about a software engineer at a big tech company. Their job wasn't created because someone loves elegant code. It's derived from consumer or business demand for the final software. Or an accountant. Their job is derived from the demand from investors and regulators for accurate financial reports. So take a look at your own career or the one you're aiming for. Trace the chain of demand backwards. What is the final product that your labor will ultimately contribute to? And how stable is the demand for that product? Answering that question, that's the first step to really understanding the economic foundation of your own professional life.